Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk About Human Rights, the show in which we discuss all things related to human rights. I'm your host, Jules Allender, and I am part of the California chapter of Youth for Human Rights International. Youth for Human Rights International's purpose is to enlighten and educate people around the world on what their human rights are, with specific focus on the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And with this education, to enable and inspire the youth of today as our leaders of tomorrow to stand up and secure these rights for themselves and all people of Earth. As you know, for each show, we like to take up one right and try to broaden your understanding of how this right is important to you and your loved ones. And for today's show, we'll be looking at human right number 29, responsibility, which states, everyone has duties to the community in which alone the free and full development of his personality is possible. In the exercise of his rights and freedoms, everyone shall be subject only to such limitations as are determined by law solely for the purpose of securing due recognition and respect for the rights and freedoms of others and of meeting the just requirements of morality, public order, and the general welfare in a democratic society. These rights and freedoms may in no case be exercised contrary to the purpose and principles of the United Nations. Let's take a look at a short video on this specific human right.
Good morning. I'm here to read you your rights.
My what?
We are all free and equal. Don't discriminate. You have the right to life.
You have the right to life and to live in freedom and safety.
You have a right to education. You have a right to your own things.
You have the right to social security. You have the right to play.
You have the right to democracy. You have the right to asylum.
You have the right to take responsibility.
And no one
and nobody can take these rights and freedoms away from you.
Why are you doing this?
You have a right to know.
Let's examine these ideas a little more closely. A duty is more than a request. It's a personal commitment to another person, group, or organization. It's what drives us to act with purpose, to stand up for others when they need it most. As it states, everyone has duties to the community in which alone the free and full development of his personality is possible. This highlights the essential role of community in personal growth. True freedom isn't achieved in isolation, but within a supportive, interactive community where individuals contribute to each other's well-being. And by fulfilling our responsibilities to society, helping others, respecting rights, and supporting collective goals, we foster an environment where everyone can thrive. This mutual exchange of support enables personal development, as each person's contributions empowers others, creating a cycle of growth. Ultimately, our fullest potential is realized through active engagement in a strong, caring community. People around you need your help, advice, friendship, and support. But beyond that, they need you to ensure that their human rights are intact. This isn't a simple task, nor one that any person can accomplish alone. Human rights aren't just ideas to hear about in some far-off place. They must be felt, known, and upheld right where people live, work, and learn. It takes a unique individual to care deeply enough to protect another's rights. This person is attentive to others, not self-centered or focused solely on their own circumstances. They're observant, aware, and genuinely strive to make a difference for others. Being this kind of a person requires commitment, an understanding of human rights, and a willingness to work alongside others to accomplish this goal. Safeguarding human rights is a collective effort. But in many parts of the world today, it seems like people have lost hope in human rights, surrendering to the idea of survival of the fittest or power through force. But this doesn't have to be the way forward. We can create a world of reason, calm, and freedom, a place where people have the right to pursue their dreams, experience equality, and find justice. However, we need to make the conscious choice to bring these ideas into reality. Education about human rights is a crucial step in this process. The more people know and discuss the meaning of these rights, the stronger their presence becomes in society. Sadly, too many people witness injustices but do nothing, often because they don't recognize them as human rights abuses. Education is the key to awareness, allowing people to see, understand, and act against violations when they occur. In fact, the most effective way to take away someone's human rights is to deny them education about their rights and freedoms. And when individuals are unaware of their liberties, they can't fully realize or defend them. This education is essential. And perhaps it's surprising that we need to learn our rights instead of inherently knowing them. As children, we often need guidance and limitations to stay safe. But as we grow, we must be taught about our human rights and how to identify when they're at risk. This awareness can then build into a lifelong ability to protect these rights for ourselves and others. And with such education, human rights can become a lived reality. If we commit to watching out for our neighbors' rights, we can create a society where these freedoms are upheld for everyone. But before we get to our special guest for the show, let's take a look around the world at some good news that occurred in human rights. After a 100-year effort, Egypt has been officially declared malaria-free by the World Health Organization. This article states, in an achievement hailed as truly historic by the WHO, Egypt has joined 44 countries and one territory to officially be declared malaria-free. Authorities in Egypt launched their first efforts to eradicate malaria around 100 years ago. And while this certification is an incredible achievement, the country will continue its work to maintain that status. A country is certified as malaria-free when its transmission chain is interrupted for at least 3 consecutive years. Why is this good news? Malaria still kills at least 600,000 people every year, nearly all of them in Africa, and it's been a consistent presence in Egypt since ancient times. Thanks to global progress in treating and preventing the deadly disease, more and more countries are achieving malaria-free status, equating to thousands of lives saved every year. That definitely is good news. Over the past decade, awareness of human trafficking has grown substantially due to the combined efforts of governments, non-government organizations, NGOs, and extensive media campaigns. This heightened awareness is visible across multiple areas, including public campaigns, legislative actions, education, and media coverage. The increased visibility and understanding of trafficking have encouraged communities to recognize and report it, fostering a strong collective effort against this global issue. Public awareness campaigns have played a key role in increasing knowledge about human trafficking. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security's Blue Campaign, for example, has made significant strides in educating the public, law enforcement, and industry partners. The campaign utilizes a variety of media platforms to raise awareness on how to recognize and respond to signs of trafficking. This rise in awareness is also reflected in the steady increase in reports made to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. Operated by the Polaris Project, the hotline has seen a significant increase in the volume of reported cases. In 2021 alone, it received over 50,000 signals, including calls, texts, and online chats, from individuals across the United States. This increase in reporting indicates that more people are recognizing trafficking situations and are willing to report them, reflecting a growing public engagement in combating human trafficking. Legislative action has further contributed to increased awareness and protection against trafficking. Governments around the world have passed stricter laws and policies aimed at addressing trafficking more effectively. These laws provide a legal framework to hold traffickers accountable and support survivors, showing a deepened commitment from policymakers to address this issue. Educational programs in schools and universities also play a vital role in increasing awareness. By introducing human trafficking topics into curriculum, educational institutions are fostering early awareness among students. Organizations like the Polaris Project provide resources and training materials that help communities understand the signs and impact of trafficking. Early education empowers younger generations to recognize the warning signs and know how to respond safely, ultimately reducing the likelihood of future trafficking incidents. Despite these significant advances, challenges remain. Misconceptions about the nature of trafficking still persist, as many people mistakenly associate it only with sex trafficking, while labor trafficking is often overlooked. Labor trafficking, which affects millions globally, involves exploitation in various industries from agriculture to domestic work. In conclusion, the growing awareness of human trafficking is an encouraging step toward addressing this pervasive issue. However, continuous education, advocacy, and accurate information are essential to fully understand and address all forms of trafficking. By maintaining these efforts, society can work toward a future where human trafficking is recognized, reported, and ultimately eradicated. My guest today is one of the people maintaining the effort to continue to shine a light on this blight. Christina Wilburn is a research and training manager with Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking out of Colorado. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for being here. First, can you go ahead and introduce to us the mission of Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking and the key areas of focus for your organization?
Yes. So Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking is a Colorado state-wide nonprofit organization with the mission of combating human trafficking, of course, in the state of Colorado, but nationally and around the world. We have 4 very specific programs to help us with that. I am part of the training education program, in which my main duty is to go around the state of Colorado and bordering states, as well as doing some international trainings virtually on recognizing what is human trafficking, and helping professionals, specifically systems working with youth, healthcare providers, law enforcement, and others, to see what it is and how to work with survivors when they interact with them. Then we have our research program, in which we do a very extensive report every 5 years on what the impact of human trafficking looks like, specifically in the state of Colorado, some of those root causes. And then we have our leadership development program, where people can intern, for those who would like to get involved in the anti-human trafficking movement. And finally, we have our hotline. So Laboratory to Combat Human Trafficking, also known as LCHT, oversees the Colorado Human Trafficking Hotline, which is made up of volunteers who take tips of some form of exploitation, also makes referrals for resources for survivors, either to survivors who call the hotline, family and friends, or other service providers.
That's a tremendous amount. This is quite an organization, and that's incredible. We'll definitely get more into all the details in which you gave us and all the services that the organization offers. I'm curious, and as you were talking and laying out all these different aspects that the organization does, I want to ask you, and I'm just wondering, how did you come about finding your way in this type of organization?
So that's a great question. I have worked with survivors of human trafficking in other capacities, in previous occupations. Working within this social justice issue is something that sort of just came about regardless of the previous jobs that I had, I always found myself eventually working around the issue of human trafficking. I was actually a board member for LCHT prior to taking this position with the training education program. I was offered, and I thought about it and I said yes, because I felt like at that point, my focus should be on educating individuals, specifically, like I said, professionals, on not only what human trafficking actually is, but how to interact and work with survivors in both a trauma-informed and trauma-responsive way.
That's awesome. It's and it just amazes me when we talk to different individuals in different areas of human rights. Kind of this tenure or lifelong dedication to a topic that is one that's tough to talk about, one that's tough to confront, and it takes takes a definite certain type of strong, powerful, driven person to stand in a role like yours, over and over and over again. So I just, again, as you were talking about all the different services, I was like, wow, I wonder how she came about, it to the organization and in your role. So I definitely want to commend you and thank you. And yeah, it's just awesome. So very well done. All right. So let's get back to human trafficking. So it is a complex issue. And how do you define it to the general public? And what are the most common misconceptions people have about it?
Okay, I will try to keep this short and sweet. So when I am talking to community or the public or professional sectors, I always start off with what we call the definition that's known globally as well as nationally of human trafficking, which is a severe form of exploitation for labor, including sex, through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. A lot of times, as Jules stated, a lot of people focus on the sex trafficking piece because that's what's very popular in like movies and social media. But there's actually two forms, commercial sex acts and labor exploitation. And then through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. So depending on your state, depending on your country, that part of the definition may be interpreted differently. For example, in the state of Colorado, we focus on the coercion piece. But it does require force, fraud, or coercion. So someone's been exploited for labor, commercial sex acts, or both. And they're either being forced in their exploitation, coerced, or the individual misrepresented themselves and or facts, which led to the victim slash survivor's exploitation.
Wow.
As to common misconceptions, so I often, like when I'm doing a training, I have sort of like a tension-free moment where I just talk about like Hollywood movies that people have seen, things they see in social media, the white van that's driving down the street, snatching people up, or allegedly parked in your department store or grocery store, taking people out of the parking lot. That is called kidnapping. Kidnapping is a crime. It's not necessarily an indication of human trafficking. Majority of survivors know their trafficker before their exploitation. The red twist ties on your car door, the front door of your house, I have no idea where that rumor came from, but again, that's not an indication of human trafficking. The traffickers do not warn their victims before exploiting them. No one is being pulled from underneath their beds. And no one is being locked up in basements or cages or to the bedrooms. Survivors of human trafficking are literally people who go from home to work and home to school. They could be someone that you see crossing the street every day. It's not limitation to their physical freedom that keep people in their exploitation, but it's factors of vulnerability that makes it difficult for them to leave their exploitation. Also, because they fear what may happen if they or what their trafficker may try to do if they try to leave.
Got it. Yeah, that's we've never had someone break down those misconceptions, so that's extremely helpful. Obviously, I was aware that the large majority of individuals who are trafficked know their trafficker before, because it can be a very slow kind of insidious relationship, and then they're being trafficked in some way, and they're dully or very little, they have very little awareness of what is specifically happening to them until they do. And like you said, then they have reasons that keep them there. And those can
Yes.
be right. But those are really good misconceptions to handle because I think a lot of individuals throughout the world think that it just happens, right? You get snatched up off the street, you're held at gunpoint, you are locked up in cages. We see that, or locked in a basement, handcuffed to a pole, right? We see that a lot on crime shows and movies and things of that nature, where the awareness level needs to come up even higher because it's just not that aggressive, I guess one could say.
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Yes, and I definitely want to emphasize the it's not a stranger are being held at gunpoint. A lot of survivors do not realize they are victims of human trafficking. That word trafficking throws them off because of what's in social media, what's in movies. They assume they have to be moved from one place to the other. But most of the time, the exploitation of an individual for labor or sex is happening in their own backyard. For example, survivors I worked with in Colorado, the city they were born in and the city of their exploitation is the same city. And when it comes to traffickers, it's not, like I said, the stranger or the tall Black or Hispanic guy. A lot of traffickers are mostly someone that the survivor knows, who is providing for their needs for a consistent period of time, mostly a couple of years on time before they are being exploited. Because statistically, 30% of our traffickers is a caregiver and parent. So you're looking at mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, and grandpa. 40% of our traffickers is someone that survivor has an intimate relationship with. So husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other. So that means 70% of traffickers is someone that survivor knows and loves.
Wow.
70%.
Wow.
More than 27% of traffickers is someone of power who knows of that survivor. So their teacher, their doctor, their therapist, their employer. So it's less than 3% of that stranger danger thing that we often see in movies. And all of the survivors I have worked with over the last decade knew their trafficker before their exploitation.
Yeah, I appreciate you really thoroughly laying that out because I think, again, the stigma of it all is the stranger danger. But yeah, I mean, 70%, that is painstakingly high.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. And so what are the primary factors that make individuals vulnerable to human trafficking, and how does your organization work to address these vulnerabilities?
So great question. So factors of vulnerability are more importantly around needs. So there is not a specific image when it comes to a survivor of this crime or the trafficker. Because remember, 70% of all traffickers is someone that survivor knows and loves. There's a huge possibility that a trafficker looks just like them. And in those situations, the traffickers are putting themselves in a situation where they can provide for that victim/survivor's needs. So we have people who are vulnerable, and vulnerability comes in all types of social identities and demographics and physical features. And so we're looking at someone who's like has a history of abuse or neglect as a child, domestic violence victim, people who are abandoned because of their gender or sexual orientation identity, the lack of companionship or relationship with a family, homelessness, being discriminated because of their race or religious background. And that's not an exhaustive list. I'm just sort of listing some of the common things that we see. And then with youth specifically, youth who have find themselves exiled by their family, friends, and community. They're looking for, because of how they identify with their gender or sexual orientation, they're looking for someone to have that relationship with. Socialization is still very key for youth, as well as because they're youth, it means they're still minors. So they depend on adults for their needs. So that makes them more vulnerable to trafficking. Not their gender or sexual orientation that makes them more vulnerable, but it's their family, friends, and community reaction to it. And a lot of them, unfortunately, end up homeless And they end up in a situation where they can be groomed for exploitation by a trafficker because a trafficker comes along to a youth, young adult, or adult, and it's like, hey, you're homeless. You've been abandoned because of how you identify in various areas. Sorry, you were discriminated against based on your race. That really, really sucks. How about you come with me? I can provide you with food, shelter, and clothing. I have a group of people who will instantly love you and become your family. And then at some point, I will show you how to be financially stable. So a lot of times it's those things. And also with youth, uh, who have history of abuse and neglect, who find themselves in foster care system, their mindset of what that system looks like and what that means to them. So not what Department of Human Services is illustrating or trying to depict, but it's the mindset of that youth. Because by the time they end up in foster care, they're first told that their family and friends do not love them enough without abusing or neglecting them. That their family within the area cannot pass the very basic criminal background check to be considered family caregivers. So they have to go live with strangers that are being paid by the government to take care of them. And if for some reason that placement doesn't work out, they're going to go live with another set of strangers who are also being paid by the government to take care of them. So when youth run from their foster care and they find themselves interacting with a trafficker, the trafficker provides for all their needs. Some of their wants could care less about curfew or them interacting with the family members that DHS tried to keep them safe from. When that trafficker finally has a conversation about how they need to work to help pay and provide for the family, it makes sense to that youth because in their mindset, by the time they hit the foster care system and been placed a few times, they truly believe that for someone to truly care for them, they have to be getting paid for it. So it's those various things when it comes to like factors of vulnerability, regardless of the individual's age and gender that we see.
Yeah.
That
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was about to say that just make them more vulnerable to be groomed and then exploited.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was a very not the obviously what occurs, but you really painted a picture and made it very clear how it works and why it works. And yeah, it just was that's very educational to the audience because sometimes we have individuals come in and talk and they'll give stats which are gruesome, but they don't
Mhm.
lay out exactly how it works. Like how can a youth fall into the trap
Yes.
from their home not being stable, they get into foster care and then they run from foster care. And then this is what they're given. They're given their basic needs, and the biggest thing being companionship and group and having people who care about you. And then, and so one question on that is, okay, so let's just take that example. The youth then gets taken in by the trafficker. What types of jobs or works or services does this youth provide for the trafficker? And I mean, I think the sexual human traffic or child sex trafficking, I think that's pretty obvious. They're gonna,
Yes.
right? But what are the other things?
So there's not really an exhaustive list. Unfortunately, it's what traffickers believe they can get away with. Most traffickers are very bold. They are often exploiting individuals and survivors in front of other people because they depend on society to have their definition of what human trafficking is based on what they see in movies. So they feel like they can get away with it. So it's generally like with labor exploitations, you sometimes find themselves in a situation where they don't know their labor rights. They don't know, like in the United States, it is considered slavery for someone to work and not get paid, period. Regardless of citizenship status. In most cases in the United States, if you're working a job, you have to be making at least minimum wage, depending on what their job is, unless there is a specific agreement between the employer and employee that the employee agrees to make less than minimum wage because the employer is providing like adequate shelter, I emphasize adequate, or transportation, or something as part of the job. And in those situations, that agreement should be in writing. So a lot of you find themselves in a situation where they don't know their labor rights, and they're relying on their employer slash trafficker to tell them about them. In several cases, we see a situation where a youth is living with their employer. Other employer starts controlling like their schedule, isolating them from family and friends. And then when the youth is threatening to leave because they aren't getting paid, then the trafficker will threaten that youth's family and friends, because trafficker often gets information about the victim's family, friends, their social network, people in their lives, because they use that as a type of coercion and force to keep people in their exploitation. Oftentimes, you may find a situation where a trafficker is exploiting that youth's parents or caregivers, and then that youth find themselves in that exploitation as well. Or a trafficker will use like threats of physical violence to that single parent for that youth to continue and stay in their exploitation.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's very helpful. And then what are some signs that an average person could potentially recognize that someone is a victim of human trafficking or trafficking?
Yes. So I would love to say that there is like a physical like sign, that one thing where you can be like, yes, this is it. Unfortunately, it's a lot of things. Most of the time, it depends on your relationship with that survivor, and being aware and observing changes. So I'll start with youth since that's what we were talking about. So if you have a professional personal relationship with a youth, and you start noticing things like all of a sudden they're skipping class, they're not attending school, they're not able to pay attention in class. More so, let's assess that before we start giving consequences for inability to pay attention in class, because that could be an indication of a lot of things. They may be forced to work after school, and by the time they get home, they maybe have 2 hours of sleep before they go to school. Because, like I said, survivors go in and out of their exploitation. So you will have a survivor that's still attending school that's being exploited for commercial sex acts or labor or both. You may have a youth, if they're not the ones being exploited, their caregiver is. And so they're feeling the consequence of that exploitation, because maybe they're being forced to stay up to watch their sibling group or something like that, or out of fear and concern of their caregivers. It's hard for them to go to sleep until that parent gets home. If you know the financial situation of a youth and all of a sudden they're showing up with new clothes, jewelry, they're talking about traveling around the world, just having honest conversations about where are they getting the money for that, because you know their financial situation. Youth calling significant others sugar daddy or cougar is not cute. So being aware of that. If you notice youth social media account is sexualized in nature, or they've created new ones that are sexualized in nature. A youth talking about not being able to leave their employer or no longer having possession of their government ID, not having control of their schedule. If you know a youth is more or used to be a social butterfly, but now they sort of are introverted, they isolate themselves, they always are talking about going home and doing homework. Or the flip side, where you have a youth who used to be introverted and now they're sort of like the center of attention. They're treating people to lunch. They're inviting people to parties. Who's hosting that party? Who is it? Because unfortunately, we have situations where a trafficker will make a youth what we call a bottom, where they would tell the youth that they don't have to be exploited anymore if they recruit peers or their classmates to become victims for that trafficker. And one big way to do that is to throw parties where it appears that everyone's having a good time, and then trafficker use those parties to start grooming and then exploiting friends and classmates of that youth.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all yeah, that's great. Again, the information you're providing is tremendous. Like these are fine details that no one's I mean, and we've had a tremendous amount of organizations in this area, right?
Yeah.
But these fine details in terms of what it looks like, what it sounds like, what I need to be aware of, even the fact that technically, like you're in the United States, right? You can't work for free.
Yes.
As you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, all these things started popping off in my mind of yeah, people do try to get away with that. And obviously you're gonna have your levels of abuse or
Yes.
whatnot in that. But yeah, so that was really good. And then along the same line, so prevention is as important as intervention. And I know a lot of what your organization does, or a large part that you do, is the educational programs. And you mentioned that, and I wanted you to just kind of go in depth in what that is, how it's been implemented to prevent human trafficking, and anything that you feel is pertinent.
Okay. Yes. So what we focus on when we train is not only what is human trafficking, because yes, that's important, but in reality, what that looks like. So, like when I'm training communities, I have more of a conversation of, um, as someone who is a citizen is concerned about their neighbors. These are some things that you can look for. These are some ways that you can get involved. Advocate to have trainings with your agencies and your organizations. With professionals, the same thing, asking them to get the word out. Because, like, for example, if I train like child protection services and 75 people show up, that is awesome that the 75 people show up, but then there's another 219 that didn't. So, how do we get the word out to those other 219 that didn't show up for the training? Systems working with youth, law enforcement, and healthcare providers are the top three sectors that interact with survivors on a consistent basis. However, unfortunately, survivors are often missed. A huge example of that is around 80% of survivors during their exploitation has some contact with a healthcare provider during their exploitation. But when a study was done with healthcare providers, almost 75% of them said that human trafficking was not an issue for their patient population. So there's definitely a crime that's being missed, and a lot of people are missing opportunities to help survivors. And so that prevention work is sort of like increasing awareness, increasing the number of trainings that's done. Specifically with LCHT, we do what we call a part one, where is that this is a human trafficking. We tailor that especially depending on who's in the audience. And then we have part twos and threes where we physically talk about specific scenarios in which someone may see these things. Having those dinner conversations with family, pushing back on some of the rumors and myths that are out there about what human trafficking is goes a long way. Giving people resources, our website to look at, or other websites like in California, where there's other anti-human trafficking coalitions or nonprofit organizations. And then just following up with people, having partnerships because LCHT cannot do this alone in the state of Colorado. So it's important to have those partnerships with other service providers, with law enforcement, with healthcare providers, to be like, yes, we're seeing it. This is what it looks like. And then just not trying to resolve the issue on like a global level, because that's sort of like a huge mountain. But maybe concentrating in your own area, in your own community. Like, what can I do in my community? What can I do on my street to make human trafficking awareness something that everyone knows about, to increase the awareness, and then to publicize. So having like posters or flyers or hotline cards. California has their own human trafficking hotline through CAST, which is the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking. As well as Colorado has their own human trafficking, are using the national human trafficking hotline cards. So those ways to sort of like decrease the cases of trafficking. We've come a long way, especially since 2005, where there has been legislation that's been enacted on both a national and state level, depending on the state that you're in. But unfortunately, we have a long way to go to be able to then use specific prevention techniques. I would love to be able to have a prevention conversation, but right now, majority is this is what this crime actually looks like conversation. And like I said, the awareness is increasing, but in some aspects, we still have a long way to go with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so looking forward, what are some of the goals your organization aims to achieve in the next few years? And then with that, what are some of the biggest challenges you foresee?
So our main goal is continue our mission, which is combating human trafficking. We would love to see the number of cases and referral reduced or decreased to our hotline, not necessarily because people are no longer calling, but because the exploitation isn't happening as much, because people are aware of their rights. They are aware of what needs to be done. Like, for example, in addition to labor rights, I inform a lot of people about the possession of like their government ID. Um, it is against the law in the United States for someone to come, for an employer to confiscate an employee's ID. They can take it and take a picture of it, but they're supposed to give it back. So a lot of cases of labor exploitation, we find where the survivor's government ID has been confiscated. I don't care if that's a driver's license, a passport, or work visa. It's supposed to be given back to the employee. And so with that, in addition to coercion and force, survivors are mostly reluctant to leave because especially if they're not from the United States, they're scared about getting deported. They're scared what may happen to their family and friends when they try to leave. And so for all those situations, so we want to be able to do that. Our goal is also to do like the research project we do every 5 years and have it where we've addressed the root causes. So right now, some of the root causes that we're looking at are like citizenship status, those who have migrated to the United States. We're looking at homelessness. The inability to have enough shelters is always an issue. So we know that within nationally, having enough shelters is always going to be an issue. So how do we combat that? What are some other ways that we can help? While a person is looking for like transitional housing or permanent housing, what are some other needs that we can take that we can address where they're less likely to be exploited by a trafficker? And then just continuing overseeing the human trafficking hotline for the state of Colorado and making sure that people who would like to support this cause are able to and continuing those partnerships not only throughout Colorado, but nationally and around the world, because we truly believe that it takes the effort of a lot of partnerships and agencies. It's not something that LCHT can just do by themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a lot. It's a long list. You definitely need some help. I'm sure you guys will achieve it, but yes, we've obviously come a long way, but there is a tremendous amount more to do. And so with that, so for our viewers who want to help or get involved, what are some ways they can contribute to the mission of Laboratory to combat human trafficking?
Great. So you can first go to our website. So our website is combathumantrafficking.org. Again, that's combathumantrafficking.org. A lot of information, more than what I've given just now. Attend a training. Trainings are key. I specifically focus on Colorado in trainings, but there are some agencies, like I said, CAST in California, that do trainings and resources. You can Google search for like a human trafficking training in your area. There are also training videos from Polaris, as well as in connection with the National Human Trafficking Hotline. There are websites like NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, that have educational videos for youth. And then there are some other resources that I can pass along to Jules as well. And then with LCHT, in addition to checking out our website, if you would like to donate to the cause, that would be awesome as well. You can also sign up for our newsletter. Again, we are a Colorado-based nonprofit, but we have learning opportunities all the time in which people can take that information and apply it to whatever community they're in. So getting like our monthly blog, getting information about various events or various ways that you can like help with the cause. In the state of California, seeing whether or not your hotline needs volunteers. Like I said, the hotline for the state of Colorado is made up of all volunteers who take the time from their work schedules from school to cover our shifts because our hotline is 24/7. So that is awesome. And then understanding that human trafficking is not what is portrayed in some social media aspects or in movies. Again, having that conversation with close friends and family goes a long way because a lot of times you will find yourself in a position where your family and friends trust what you say more so than what they see on like CNN. So having those conversations and being an advocate for like the truth about this and what's going on. And realizing that human trafficking is not a crime that just happens to special people or is something that just happens every now and then. It is a crime that is happening daily. Like right now, over 50 million cases of human trafficking around the world, with 22 million being in forced marriages, 4 million in state-sanctioned forced labor, 24 million in sex and labor trafficking. However, only 6.7 million is that commercial sex acts piece, while 17.7 million is labor exploitation. So labor exploitation is 3 times more than the commercial sex acts. Unfortunately, we're missing it because people don't think about labor exploitation or labor trafficking because it's not that popular thing that you see in social media. And those numbers is very similar in the United States. In the United States, there's more labor exploitation crimes than we see with sex trafficking / commercial sex acts. So being aware of that as well.
Wow. Yeah. That's excellent. And so, I mean, yeah, it's the labor, right? 3 times, that's quite a staggering statistic. And then actually the movie that just came out, and I watched it, City of Dreams. Is that what it's called? I believe, which was solely focused on the exploitation of labor trafficking and children who, I mean, it is some Hollywood, so obviously it's a little out reality because what you're talking about, which and obviously that's included, but it's the subtleness. It's the little things that you are not aware of that people get away with, and then they just get more bold and bold, and suddenly you're at the mercy of their hands, and it's very
Yes.
unfortunate. So yeah, I mean,
Yes.
the
And
awareness.
if your trafficker is your grandmother, it's not something you will automatically see because
Right.
the assumption is, in some way, grandma's supposed to love and care for me. So it's hard for me to have conversations with survivors when I explain to them, you were exploited, you're a survivor of human trafficking, what that looks like. And their understanding is that it's not something that was unique to them, that human trafficking is a crime that occurs to a lot of people, with those traffickers being someone that they know and love. So
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, one, for doing all that you do. It's tremendous. It's needed. And just keep going. And if there's any way we can ever help you, please do reach out. And thank you so much for your time and sharing all of those essential points that people need to be aware of that aren't talked about. And so I appreciate your time, and we will definitely be in touch. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
And that's our show for the day. I hope you enjoyed and learned a tremendous amount about not only sex trafficking, but human trafficking when it comes to labor and your labor rights. As always, do feel free to hit us up on our social media handles. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We also have a YouTube channel. Let's talk about human rights. Until next time, I will see you then.